While everyone is getting settled, I'll just remind people about Twitter. And the plan had always been to be able to use Twitter as a means of identifying both questions and comments. But one way or another, it will come into its own. There's certainly people looking at the questions and comments with a view to the prize of the $50 vouchers. And I think already we have a speaker has answered one of the tweets with a response. And so it will be a means of generating some additional conversations on the side. And when we take stock at the end of the afternoon, we'll see whether there are other things we can do with those inputs, including perhaps rebroadcasting some of the answers to a wider audience, if not otherwise available on Twitter. So our next session begins. We've got first up Kath Giles, who's the Investment Manager for Brandon Capital Partners.
Hi, it's an absolute pleasure to get to join you today and speak. So thanks very much for having me. So the MRCF, it was established in late 2007 as a collaboration between Australian superannuation funds, state governments, leading medical research institutes and research hospitals. Despite the fact that it's Victorian-based, it relied heavily on WA to kickstart, with Western, under the leadership of Harold Masseria, partnering with South Australians statewide to provide the initial investment funds for the MRCF. WA was the third state government to come on board, and WA was the first to have a satellite investment office. Today, the MRCF has over $530 million in investment funds. We're backed by 4 of Australia's largest superannuation funds, CSL, the federal government, and have state government support and people on the ground in 5 of the mainland states in New Zealand. We are a fund with a difference, as we act as both a funding partner but also as a commercialisation partner for our medical research institutes, working on the projects that we invest in, but also assisting the research institutes further develop their research projects in-house through advice and introductions. Finally, as part of repayment of the state government support, we actively work within the medical innovation ecosystems in our respective states to help develop those through involvement in initiatives such as Spark CoLab and Accelerating Australia and WA. As a team, we've developed strong and broad networks into the global medical industry, which enables us to connect researchers with global industry partners relevant to their projects early in the development, meaning that we can help projects progress and get developed in a way that will really address the problems in our target markets, and also in a way that will have met the requirements for the industry partners going forward. Furthermore, we also act as a networking point with investment review committee meetings held every 8 weeks. At those meetings, a representative from each of the medical research institutes attends, and all investment opportunities get put forward before this meeting at least twice prior to making an investment. As a team, this allows us to access the hive brain of the IRC with their networks and experience, making our investment cases stronger. Furthermore, it enables collaboration between members on a deal-by-deal basis, and thanks in particular to our research hospital partners, we've been able to get into clinical trials quickly and more economically than we otherwise would. So, how about some outcome data? Since 2007, we've made over 30 investments in drug, device and diagnostic companies. We've had our first 2 exits in 2014 and 2015, worth a sum total of greater than $1.6 billion. And we have 3 device companies with products on market and changing people's lives. Excitingly, as Roger mentioned earlier, he announced our recent $6 million investment in the technology that's been developed by breast cancer surgeon Professor Christabel Saunders in collaboration with biomedical engineer Dr. Brendan Kennedy. Both of these researchers are well respected on a global scale for their research individually, and the result of their collaboration is a technology that has the potential to impact patient outcomes in breast cancer on a global scale. It's an absolute privilege to get to work with them to develop and trial this technology in WA towards that goal, and we look forward to finding more WA investments to make. Thanks very much.
So really terrific achievements in just a little over a decade of existence, it would seem. Questions or comments are welcome. We have microphones, or if you're feeling forceful.
So how do researchers involved what's their
Very welcome to give me a call. So, and I guess from my point of view, very early to interact early with researchers and offer, and definitely through the UWA and other commercialisation offices, as we have very good relationships with them and enjoy working together. But yeah, you're definitely welcome to give me a call and have a chat, or go through UWA if that's an option for you.
Discovery and diplomacy sitting side by side. Documented development. I think that's true. Thanks very much, Heather. We've now got Professor Tim Inglis from UWA. You can have all the time you like.
Good answer. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this in this august company. Professional colleagues, learned friends, I want to, in 5 objects in 3 minutes, explain what the Marshall Centre in UWA, in partnership with PathWest, is doing about a problem that 3 of today's opening speakers spoke about, antimicrobial resistance. So, this is a problem where, particularly in the case of serious infection, we're dealing with a time-critical emergency. First object. The time-critical aspect of sepsis means that most physicians, when they're treating patients, won't wait until the laboratory comes up with an answer on what antibiotics should be used. They know that they're paying for time, and they know that every delay of 1 hour will result in a 7% increase in mortality. Consequently, they will guess, and they'll roll the dice in their choice of antibiotics. To improve the odds for the patient, they may play 2 or even 3 antibiotics, or they may use a broad spectrum antibiotic. But what antimicrobial resistance does is it takes away the options, one by one, sometimes whole families, stacking the odds very much against the patient, and that is the dilemma that we face. So as we combat antimicrobial resistance, and particularly in severe sepsis, we considered that what we needed to do was to work out how, at the point of care, we could work out what way the dice rolls. In order to do that, we can't wait the 2 to 3 days for the laboratory to come up with its answers. We need to get faster. And as some of you know, we've been training. Our new flow-assisted susceptibility test, a bit of a cheesy name, but fast, provides us with a new weapon. We've got a grip on the method, our guard is up, we're developing flexible systems, and yes, you guessed it, I'm getting to the point. Because if you take a tip from me, we're not aiming at a human-sized target. We're aiming at a very small target, in fact, a molecular target in a cellular, a unicellular organism. So we're miniaturizing, and we are working towards a chip-based technology which we're well on the way to developing. With Gates funding and with Health Department funding, we've made our first major step forward, and we expect to be able to make further announcements in the very near future. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I think as with being near someone on a bicycle, if you're driving a car, I'm going to be about 1.5 meters from you at any point in time, particularly if I have to invoke any rules, but I don't. But now I've got questions. Yeah, Chris again.
Yeah. I know you have a passion for rural health. Are these sort of technologies that you're developing now, are they going to be transferable to more remote locations? Because time is obviously critical in second the sample.
Yes, the grant application went in on Monday. Right. Next question. And that wasn't a setup, by the way.
For Barry Marshall,
One of my other gripes about the health department is that they often come up with an all-encompassing IP agreement which really takes over your life and any money that ever comes out of it goes to the health department. It stifles the whole process. And I just wondered if you've noticed anything that happened with collaboration.
Barry, that was another Dorothy Dix question. I sold my soul many years ago. I drink black, unsweetened coffee, and that should tell you all you need to know. I have been quoted before as regarding Machiavelli as a saint.
at the risk of inducing the use of one of those weapons, can I say thanks, Tim? I think if Peter Clinton, our chief scientist, were here, he would be over the moon about not only coming to the point but offering a tip. Terrific. Our next speaker is, let's make sure I've got my order right. Yes, I think it's Masseria from Edith Cowan University, talking about a project with the Marshall Centre, the Noisy Guts project. Adam.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you here today. I am from the School of Engineering at Edith Cowan University. That tells you about the inter-collaboration actually with between institutions, but also the interdisciplinarity of the research development that we are working on, which should be encouraged and actually even developed much further. My background is engineering. A few years ago, I was finalist 3 times in 3 different years of the WA Innovator of the Year Award for an acoustic sensing technology that detects termites and identifies lepers and is selected from different. So this is the technology. This is one device, small device. And now this is engineering. Why am I talking about engineering? While we are here developing some research on the Noisy Guts project, which is medical research. In fact, I would present that in a video. Can I have the video, please, or is it something like here? Thank you. Less than 1 minute.
Irritable bowel syndrome is a chronic gut disorder that causes abdominal pain, bloating, diarrhea, and constipation. IBS affects up to 1 in 5 Australians and around 11% of the world's population. The Noisy Guts project is the brainchild of Nobel laureate Professor Barry Marshall. He had the idea of applying acoustic sensing technology designed to pick up the tiny sounds of munching termites to the human guts. Our research demonstrates a strong correlation between gut noise patterns and specific gut disorders. Our acoustic belt records gut noises over time, so doctors can accurately screen and diagnose gut disorders.
That tells you much better than 100 images. Images better than 1,000 words. So the belt itself collects acoustic data, sends it to the cloud, and we use analysis of the data. We actually plan to use a smartphone to identify the link between the symptoms and what causes these symptoms, so the triggers. been working very hard in the centre, working together between engineers and medical researchers and scientists to, in fact, build a system or proof of the concept that consists of a belt. You heard talking about the belt. So it's a belt that has sensors on it, listening for a certain time, for a long time, 2 hours, 24 hours, whichever. The time that is needed defined by the doctors. If the doctors need to listen for half an hour, then it can listen for half an hour. If you see a GP, the GP will listen for a few seconds, and he or she will have to have make a decision on that. So what we're doing here, we are listening longer, and we have added a few twists to it as well. So we are, at the centre, we're collaborating with universities, developing this proof of concept. And we have already started getting some results, and we are looking for much more volunteers. We have about 30 or 35 volunteers who came through. This morning we had 4, and we started getting results. So we're looking for people, healthy people, you know that, any healthy people, people who have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, also people with IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease. I've learned so much medical words in the past few months. IBD is actually Crohn's disease, or what is it? To read it. Ulcerative colitis. And we are looking for much more people to come through, to sit in the centres for a couple of hours in the morning, comfortably, quietly, and we would like to listen to your guts, collect the data, and make sense of it in the next few months. So please call amongst your connects network, and if you have anything here, basically, as you've seen, 20% of Australians have IBS. So there are a few people here in this room who have it. So, thank you, and I hope you have lots of questions.
Don't take this thought.
Yeah, sorry, but I was working with someone who used to say, please don't just throw me the money.
And I hope there are not lots of questions because we've only got time for one. I'm sure, yeah.
Maybe you can take us back to the conversation where that link between your technology and this project.
Okay, how it first came up?
Yeah,
I got a call from Barry.
Adam, if my dear wife were here, I think she'd be suggesting that there might be more value for someone like me in having a means of suppressing the noisy gut rather than listening to it. Anyway, thanks, Adam, and yes, lots of opportunities for people to participate firsthand in research. Our next speaker comes from the Centre for Entrepreneurial Research and Innovation. It's the CEO, Dr. Carolyn Williams.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you to the organisers, and in particular Josephine, who is just there, for the invitation today. I'd like you to help me for the next couple of minutes, and in doing that, I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine the picture in your mind's eye of beautiful Perth city skyline, with the magnificent Swan River, which has been absolutely stunning over the last few weeks, sitting in front of it, glistening. And what can you see atop of the tallest buildings in that skyline? Possibly the names Woodside, BHP and Rio Tinto spring to mind. Major international resource companies dominate the skyline. Now imagine, keep your eyes closed, now imagine what that skyline would look like in 2 generations from now. In 50 years, when our grandchildren's children are looking for work, who will be the big players then on top of those skyscrapers? Will there be any resources left to drill for? Here we have the paradox of plenty in WA, where the investment in resources crowds out funding in other sectors. So what do you see? What is the future of WA? What will we do when global resource companies leave and stop employing us, not in our hundreds, but in their thousands? Okay, open your eyes now. So what did you see? What is the change? What are we doing here today? Networking for what? Okay, well, I would suggest a greater future.
What happens when Rio, Woodside and BHP leave the room? It's not the first time you've heard the cry, we need to diversify our economy in WA and create a more sustainable future. It behoves us to create our own global entities which will employ Australian workers and benefit Australia. And we've got a few possibilities today. Oncares might be on top of that skyscraper. So I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine now, Professor Robert Langer. He's got a great business model for his lab, and he's going to tell us a little bit about whether he thinks he's a researcher or an entrepreneur. And as you can see from the stats next to his beautiful self, he's a pretty eminent scientist himself.
Would you consider yourself the entrepreneur first or researcher first?
Researcher first. I mean, I do the entrepreneurship because I want to see the research that we do get out to the world and help people. So, so the research has come first, but I don't want to just write a paper. You know, in other words, I think a standard thing in academics, and it was for me too, was to just write the paper. But what I realized is that if I just wrote the paper, you know, that's not going to get it out to the world. And the beauty of these companies is that it does get it out to the world.
That was a 30-second clip from a 30-minute interview that we had with Robert. So you can see the whole thing. So lastly, for those of you who don't know what Masseria is, Centre for Entrepreneurial Research and Innovation, that's not what I'm talking about today. But I hope we are driving change here in WA, and our aim is to support our innovation ecosystem by creating a safe environment on neutral territory. Masseria is an independent, not-for-profit organisation with no hidden agendas. We don't take IP from the teams coming through, particularly. However, our agenda is to bring all the necessary players together to support the establishment of new global entities born out of the effective translation of world-class research being done right here, and we've heard some fabulous examples of that right now. This is our interpretation of our innovation ecosystem, comprising what's already been mentioned in that ecosystem: government, universities and research institutes, investors, and of course businesses. So, in the words of Peter Klinken earlier, let's start unlocking our potential.
Extremely well. We do have time for one or two questions. Any takers of that opportunity? Just a quick one from me, Carolyn. Masseria has been going for a year now or more, or is that when the building has been in existence for less than a year? Is that right?
We moved in August, so not even a year.
And I can certainly vouch for the fact that it welcomes a range of people from a range of backgrounds to create opportunity. What do you think? It might be inappropriate in favourites early on in the piece. What do you think have been some of the achievements today around bringing people together or putting courses on that sort of thing? What's been the most popular?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I have to say that bringing a mixture, we've had PhD students and beyond as participants from each of the 5 universities and research institutes, including Berkeley's and Kids. And I think what we're creating is an opportunity for not only multidisciplinary but multi-organisation people to get together. Again here, people who would not normally cross paths, sitting together and talking about startups together. And that's probably the biggest thing.
Thanks, Caroline. So, after our next talk, there'll be a chance for some further networking, but let's move immediately to the next talk. Brian Liebman, Executive Director of ResApp Health, and I heard earlier has been involved in quite a number of interesting developments, and we might hear about at least one of those.
All right, thanks everybody, particularly to the Marshall Institute for inviting me. I want to start by just talking about my experience in the healthcare sector. I was the chairman of biotech in Western Australia for 7 years up until the end of last year. And I've been involved as either founder or co-founder in 3 ASX-listed healthcare companies. All 3 are now based on the East Coast. They're all founded with West Australian money. Much to my great dissatisfaction, that is the case. I did meet with Colin Barnett at his invitation 2 years ago at his office, and we talked about that situation, and as Chief Minister for Science, he told me that he just doesn't get biotech. So I would say that I'm looking forward to working with the new government, and in the case of ResApp Health, is really what I'm here to talk about. It's a digital healthcare company. It's having sort of listed two biotech companies previously. The world of digital healthcare I thought was absolutely fascinating. And it's all about what you can do with a smartphone. I was interested with the Noisy Guts presentation just before. And I'm interested in what can you do with this tool. It reminds me of that Star Trek device, the tricorder, where you simply scan a patient and it tells you what's going on. And that's really what's happening here. Now, I've got this screen on there, the slide, and I want to let your eyes cast over this because what I'm about to tell you sounds a bit incredulous. It was invented by what I might call a mad professor out of the University of Queensland who had this crazy idea that you could analyse the sound of a cough using a smartphone by picking up signatures in the sound of that cough and actually specifically state that it is a pneumatic cough or a bronchial cough, an asthmatic cough and so forth. The information contained in the passage of air that comes from your lungs when you cough, it's information. And that was the concept. So initially they received funding, the University of Queensland that is, received funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Pneumonia kills more children in the developing world than any other disease, so they were interested in that. They threw some money at it. We did this study, they did a study of 91 children, and you can see the accuracy rate was just phenomenal for both pneumonia and asthma. That's purely based on the sound of the cough as compared to a hospital diagnosis. Now, it was conducted in Indonesia. I frankly didn't think that was all that interesting, not really trusting what goes on over there, so I wanted to found a company that would raise money and do a substantive clinical trial in Australia. To that end, you can see this Australian paediatric study that is currently ongoing, but we've had almost 1,000 patients enrolled in that study based on the results to date. And you can see that the results are absolutely phenomenal. This is purely based on the sound of a cough into a smartphone. No other technology, no other hardware or anything. So, and the differential diagnosis at the bottom is really what's most important because that's what's most medically important. Now, moving on to this slide, did it work in adults? Well, we've already done another big study there, and this is also ongoing, but the same sort of results shown in adults as it was in children. So quite an amazing outcome. Our share price went up by some 3,000% since we listed, and it's been quite a journey. Albeit it's come back a little bit. When you have a share price move so quickly in 12 months, there are some profit taking that happens. But what will drive the share price going forward is this slide. So we were approached by Massachusetts General Hospital to be the lead hospital for our US registration study for FDA approval. And that was quite a pleasing thing to have them be lead on our clinical trial, essentially replicating the Australian study. And to that end, we have now enrolled some 1,200 almost patients. We've reached all the clinical buckets in terms of filling pneumonia, bronchitis, asthma and so forth. That trial will certainly finish in the next 2 weeks. We will then follow that up with the release of a further 1,000 patients in the Australian clinical study. So that should hopefully give investors some confidence about how the US study is going, but not exactly because they are different studies. And then I would expect by possibly mid to late July, we'll release the actual results of the US study. And that will become the basis of our FDA submission, to become the world's first respiratory diagnostic in a smartphone for respiratory illness. And I might add to be used by doctors. I'm not putting this in the hands of consumers. I get a lot of people who say, when can I get this? They're not going to get it anytime soon because the FDA doesn't want you to have it. But one day I do hope that if it becomes what I like to say the biggest disruption in healthcare since the invention of the stethoscope, I think that the FDA may consider approving this as a home diagnostic tool. And I hope by the end of this calendar year, if we do get FDA approval, that we'll be able to announce many commercial licensing deals and start paying dividends to my shareholders who would, I'm sure, be very appreciative of that, including me, because I'm the biggest shareholder. With that, I'd like to thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Brian. Again, I'm sorry, in the interests of the networking session, I think there'll be a few people that will be keen to identify themselves as either shareholders or potential shareholders to talk a bit about their interest in the presentation. And it was also interesting, I think, to see juxtaposed near each other a couple of studies that put what you would have thought were fairly simple things like sounds, and then applying analytics to identifying an outcome that you may not have otherwise guessed was possible. Anyway, I'm sorry if we can then move to, I've been given a couple of envelopes, by the way, to announcing that there are a couple of gift vouchers in my hands, and just to clarify, the gift vouchers are for a value of $50 at Coffee Anatomy, which is on the ground floor of Harry Perkins Medical Research Building. I'm sorry I don't have the particular question or comment that earned the people who are about to get them the voucher, but there are two here, Asha Stavak and Kathy Cole, for their engaging and or active questions. And I'm sure I did see Kathy here earlier. She's gone. Unlucky. And Asha. That's it. And once again, can we thank Linear for the generous donation of these and for their other support for the conference this afternoon. So the quick announcements. Last opportunity, put your business card in the receptacle out the back for the door prize. And once again, there'll be the chance to swap payables according to the little coloured card in front of you. And I'm sorry, we'll just check that in about 10 minutes, a bell will go to bring people back to the table. Thanks.